Hey, Jackie, we finally made it on after all
Yay!
of the technology things. Clearly, this is not my thing.
It's all right. It's all right.
Oh, um, so I was really excited to talk to you. I mean, we talk in spurts all the time, It's like you go through like waves where you're just doing life, and then other times you're like like back and forth. So
Hmm.
I love Marco Polo for
Yeah.
that. Um, but I want to hear like what's on your heart. I know like you just had this big shift in your life. What, and I just mean like your schooling and then this new venture, which I'm super
Hmm.
excited about because remember when we were doing some like brainstorming and coaching around like, oh my gosh, like you're going through this divorce and how are you going to
Yeah.
provide for your kids? And I had just gone through that and was still, figuring my stuff out too when we were talking.
Mhm.
So tell me all about that.
Yeah, I so much change and it's really good that we didn't do this yesterday because yesterday was a really hard day. But yesterday was a reminder of like how much life has changed and my life is like 180 of what it was at one point. And to sit here today with a master's degree and literally going to I have like 8 weeks before I start a PhD program. And that's just crazy. Like where how did I get here? And yesterday was like the one day in my life where it's like I thought that it was going to be a happy ending and it wasn't. And like because of this happening, my entire life changed. And yeah, and so this is kind of that like I've birthed this whole new venture, right? Like it's based, I feel like it's like a branch off the same tree because my passion for women and maternal health is still like there and it's like the trunk of the tree, but because of life, like I've had to take a different route and it looks different, and that looks like getting a master's degree in psychology and doing more work as far as mental and emotional health versus like hands-on, attending births and that facet, but it still includes like education. So I'm excited about that piece and just continuing educating families and really trying to build community because in my studies, a big part of it is like um postpartum depression and really wanting to reduce postpartum depression because it is a big problem. And there's so many facets, right, to postpartum and postpartum health. And we can spend a lot of time on that. I literally could spend my entire career studying that and still like only make a dent in that space. But I feel like community is a big piece of that. Like regardless of all the other factors that go into how you experience postpartum and whether or not you're healthy, like community, I feel is a big piece of that. And just looking at historically how our families and our cultures have been and where we are now in our American culture, it's very different and very solitary. And like we just don't have the community that we easily would have had in previous generations. Like we live so far away from many of our families and and sometimes that's good, but we regardless of our family of origin, we need to be able to create a community for where we are and be able to pour into other people's lives and have them pour into ours and really just be there for the mountaintops and the valleys of life. And um, yeah, and postpartum is one of those like roller coaster. It's not linear. There's lots of things going on. And if we have support in our life to really be able to actually be honest with people, particularly the women in our lives, I think it would make a big difference.
Yeah, and I love that we talked about you feeling called to not only serve women who are having babies in pregnancy and postpartum in this way, but also the people serving those women, because midwives, caregivers are, doulas. I'm just thinking about, like, because we always just think midwives, but like doulas give a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
how much it sucks the life out of you to pour into a woman as she's laboring. Other childbirth educators, people hearing the stories of women going through their births, from amazing births to traumatic births, and needing to um, have somebody who understands the birth world to hold space for them in
Mhm.
counseling and therapy and whatnot. Because I mean, I'm super blessed. My therapist was a midwife, a student midwife. She never did do midwifery, but she trained under a couple local midwives here. So when I talk about birth, she gets it. When I talk about the
Mhm.
feeling, she feels it in her body. So it makes a huge difference to have somebody who gets that world and isn't just holding space for something they really have no clue for, which is powerful in itself. You don't have to experience the same thing that other people who are sharing with you have gone through to hold space and to be helpful. But there's just a whole nother layer there when the person gets it.
Mhm. Yeah, I've heard from a few different birth workers, like midwives, in particular, about their desire. They wish that they had like crisis workers for midwives because, some midwives go through an entire season where they're back-to-back births, like babies come when they come, and you can have what you would think is like spaced out births, and it still just doesn't end up that way. And like just the secondary trauma that can happen in
Mm-hmm.
birth for various reasons. And like to be able to have that space where you're like, oh my gosh, I just need to, process just a little bit of this birth so I can go on to this next birth without, holding on to that. Because my philosophy in birth was always, I keep my crap at the door, check my crap at the door. This is not about me. This is their birth space. And if I can't manage my baggage, then I have no right to be in their space. And so that's really why I shifted out of attending births in the first place, is because it's like I can't emotionally even manage that. I would have to be working so hard to manage my personal space that I could not be of any service to another woman and her family. But in that space, I realized that, oh my goodness, there's like this need, right, for midwives who need, crisis counseling of sorts to really like fill that gap where, yeah, I have been in birth. I've, been i- around women, taught women. And while I haven't gone through every experience, like, yeah, there's that common space and that understanding of what it is like to hold space for another woman as she births her baby and whatever that story unfolds and and how that feels, and the sacredness of that.
Yeah, and I mean that brings me to another layer of how useful and helpful I feel like you would be to women, because you hit the nail on the head. Like, no matter what is going on in your life, you have to show up for these women, and you have to check your stuff at the door every single time. It does not matter. And I remember, I mean, it's been almost 5 years now. February, oh gosh, it has been 5 years, since I found out that my ex-husband had assaulted one of my oldest daughter, and when they were out of town. And I had to deal with all of that, getting an order of protection, having him removed from my home. And in the midst of that, my twin mom went into labor, and
Mm,
so I had to show up for that. And it's one thing to show up at birth, but then to have to show up on this level for extra care, um I just had to like push it all away, which
mhm,
thankfully, I think, I don't know how other midwives do it, but for some reason, I can't show up and it all just gets sucked into the universe, into a box somewhere, and I do what I need to do. And unless it's like a long birth that not much is going on, I'm not thinking about what's going on outside of the walls of this home. And I was lucky enough to have that happen. But I remember leaving that birth, it was first baby did great, second baby needed resuscitation, then mom had a hemorrhage. So there was all of that and getting mom settled. And I remember leaving the birth feeling just completely depleted and just like, I have nobody to release all of this. And it wasn't so much the birth, it was still great, it was amazing, all the things, but I had all of this stuff. And I remember driving straight to a friend's house who was on my way home, and I hadn't been able to tell anybody about what had happened um, with my ex-husband and my daughter. And just walking into her house and being like, and just like dumping. And she literally could not understand a word. I was just blubbering everything that happened. I just collapsed into a heap in her floor and just bawled
Mm,
because there was nobody to hold that space, and just having to hold this birth of these beautiful babies and be with this mom and put my stuff aside. It was just, I did it, but it was a lot. And so
mhm.
having somebody, like you said, that can just be like your on call person, that if you need to just dump, because sometimes it's not just hard births, it's hard births and your life colliding together, and just need
Right.
that. And, that's the same thing with this year for me. And I've had a lot of teenage mental health issues going on and chaos, and I still have to work. I still have to show up for moms. So I love that you have the understanding of being in the trenches. You have the understanding because you have had your own stories of extreme hard in your life. I didn't want to bring that up if that's not a part of your story you want to share today, but and then you have the training and the passion for all of these things, and then you went through your big shift with your divorce. So it's like, I love people who get it and on a visceral level.
Yeah. I wish that I could stand where I am today and not have gone through that incredibly dark valley. But I also know that that's not possible, right? Like we can't become the wisest sage, so to speak, without like experience and without hardship and without being refined by the fire of life and the hard things that life sometimes throws at you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I just wanted to point out that Jacque is one of the few of my friends who have stuck with me through all of my changes. I kind of did yesterday to, or in yesterday's live, um, how we've known each other for so long. And we met I mean, I knew Jacque online before we met in person, but we met at an indie birth conference. And, I've got a head, I'm pretty sure I was wearing head coverings at the time, a head covering on,
You
a
were,
long skirt.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
just like uber, like conservative, religious, Torah observant, just like all of the things, to like her getting to walk beside me through all of the things. I had started deconstructing before my divorce, but the divorce and all of the chaos kind of hyper, extreme lifted it forward. And, here I am now, definitely not in a head covering and definitely not in skirts, though I like a nice mini skirt. But I love that Jacque does walk as a Christian woman, mom, therapist, and uses that so she understands all of the things, but also she's not going to dump you if you don't have the same exact faith or belief system that she does. And that is something that I have so much enjoyed about being friends with you, is that you're always trying to see people as they are and not trying to make them be who you are or find the same exact answers you found for comfort and direction.
Thank you. I feel like that's such like really the heart of what who I want to be. Like I feel like that's just, and we can go on a very deep discussion of that, but just like to say that that is like a goal point. So thank you for um seeing that heart of mine come out. And yeah, like I was also thinking about our relationship and how it's like morphed. Yeah, because Nava was like a little baby when I actually met you. And yeah, it was the Indie Birth Conference in Sedona. And we sat on the panel together, and yeah, it was so different. I would say that we were very different people, both of us. Um and it was like we were standing on this side of, the hard at the time. And then we've like gone through the cauldron of fire and we're sitting on this side. And I don't still have, oh, I don't have it figured out yet, at all. But but
Me
it
either.
is like it's so different. And like I just appreciate because I have found myself also in a space where I don't really fit in a lot of spaces of like conservative Christian groups. Um, and I've felt that way for a long time. It's just kind of like added to that because of my life experience in the last 5 years. And so, yeah, like to have really people who I can disagree with on some things and like we still agree on other stuff and we can still like, work things out and just, you know, yeah, have a relationship and it doesn't have to like we don't have to look the same to be friends. And I think that is really beautiful and something that the world needs more of, truthfully, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, I remember being in the church and people using the word coexist as if it was a dirty word. And I'm like, I mean, shouldn't we be able to? Like,
Yeah.
do we want to go back to like converting, no matter what you believe, converting people by like, sword and fire? Like, don't you want
Mhm.
people to just feel loved, be loved, and make their own choices, even if you feel it's the wrong choice? I
Yeah.
still wouldn't want to like, force you to believe or do something that you wouldn't want to. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes along with like autonomy and just the desire to respect people's autonomy. And that is like, I think, rooted too in my perspective in birth and like helping women and educating families on physiological birth. And really, it wasn't so much about like, oh, I want all of the families that I teach physiological birth to choose home birth, because that's really not it at all. It was if you understand how the body works, how your body was designed to create, to build, and to birth a baby and to sustain that baby after birth, you're going to make the best decisions for you and your baby, regardless of where that is. And and that's what I want. Like, I want you to have the tools to be autonomous so that when you show up in this space, like, this is what's best for me. This is what's best for my baby. And if you need outside input on that because, something is wonky, because that does happen, that you still are able to really understand um, what is going on and be able to ask the questions and be able to make the decision and not just be a victim to um, the medical system because that can easily happen. And that's, yeah. So I think autonomy is like that big thing. And even how I parent my children is really autonomy mindful. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm still your parent and I still might have to enforce things. But I still want to, respect that you are another person and you have autonomy in whatever ways I can respect that autonomy, I try to. Yeah, so that's like the philosophy and like the overarching thing. And I think that in our, midwifery, in one thing that, going back to what you were talking about, like just unloading, and I think that when we go around and we can disassociate, and that is a coping strategy that can be helpful, but like long term it's not a healthy coping strategy. And when if we do, in your situation you didn't have somebody to navigate that space and you just start disassociating all the time, which can happen and it can kind of easily happen, you're going to be burnt out and totally just not feel anything. And that's not what we were designed to experience. Um, and so like, yeah, for us to be the best servants in birth, um, we need to be able to have that space to process and to be able to be honest. And even in, as mental health professionals, it's like we also need our spaces because we can also have secondary trauma because we're listening to the stories of other people. And we need to be able to have support in our lives to be able to be like, oh my gosh, this story that I just heard is so hard to navigate. Because yeah, you like even in this space, it's like I'm listening to your story. I'm holding space for you. Well, I have my own story that I still have to like put in the back of my head. And sometimes it can be triggering and you just still have to be like, yes, I'm present. And that can be hard. So I think for all of us, it is important again to have community and support.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, I know that you were a little bit tight on time. You're like 10 o'clock, right?
Oh no, we could go to 10:30. So we were doing an hour. So you could totally do an hour, but I was like, I just want to make sure that because we can talk about a lot of stuff
Oh,
for a long
yeah,
time.
yeah, me
So
too. I wanted to respect your time.
no,
There's
you're
the
fine.
other thing I was going to ask you when you were talking. I was thinking about it. I was like, well, I was just clarifying. Like people just think when we talk about autonomy, it means just being like, this is my way and this is the only way and things like that. But like I see autonomy, and this is what I explain to my clients. I want to set a buffet of options before you. I have my opinions, and I am definitely biased. Everybody's biased, by the way.
Yeah,
Everybody's biased. I'm definitely biased, but I don't know what's the best thing for you. And so
hmm
I want to present all the options, not just the ones I'm comfortable with or think everybody should do, which again, there aren't any that I think everybody should do. I am very pro home birth and very pro hands off, undisturbed birth, but I don't think that's right for everybody. I mean, here's
right.
a quick example. I just had a birth recently where, and this mom is a birth worker too. It was her one, two, three, fourth baby. And there was like 12 years since her last one, but she is a birth photographer and doula, postpartum doula, all the things. And when she was in labor, I came, she was like in the throes of labor. She wanted an exam. I made sure she wanted one, did one. And she's like, oh, that feels so much better. Like, keep your hands in there. And I'm just like, haha, like, I'm not even. She's like, no, really, can you put another glove on and like do that again? Because I guess the feedback felt really good for her, right? And
hmm
so she was like, and then her baby was literally pushed my hand out of the way and was born. It was super quick, beautiful. It was just like that felt so much better. I felt more in control of myself. And you know me, like I don't even offer vaginal exams in labor unless we've been in labor a really long time and there's some wonky something going on, because they don't really offer us
Right,
a lot of valuable information. They can and give us some information, but that right there, that's about putting
right,
everything on the table. That mom had the buffet. These are your choices. This is what you want.
right.
This is what we're here. So to not give a mom something that she is fully educated about, fully aware, pros and cons, and just to be like, no, this is the way I do it. That's
hmm
right, just as wrong as a doctor enforcing something like an episiotomy or hands on when a mom is saying don't touch me, so you
Right.
can go both sides. So I love, with autonomy, I feel like it's loading the buffet of all of the top choices: c-section, hospital, home, undisturbed, hands off, all of the things, and then just educating on what these things mean, the pros and cons in general. And then there's the pros
hmm
and cons or benefits and risks per mom that could change. Like the
Right,
same benefit to one mom would be a risk to another mom. And so again,
right.
we don't get to choose. Autonomy is you choosing, not somebody else choosing for you. And that should be how that can make every woman feel powerful, no matter what she ends up choosing or how her birth ends up being. Even in an unplanned c-section, that can feel powerful if you feel you have full autonomy in it.
Yeah. I totally agree. And we as humans, we want control in our life, and we do. We feel like, okay, if I can control this, then there's some amount of safety in that. And it is largely delusional because there's really not much that we can actually control. I can control what shirt I wear. Can't even control whether or not I spill something on the shirt. Okay, like it happens. But we feel comfortable when we feel like we have control over something. And we don't want when somebody else controls stuff for us, right? And so even in parenting, like I often, will talk about like, is it really that important for your kid to wear matching clothes? Like, oh, they don't want to wear what I picked out for them. Okay, well, is it so bad for them to pick out what they want to wear, right? Like, okay, yeah, it might look heinous to you. Does it matter? And because that's happened to me. I'm like, well, I wouldn't choose that. And you look so silly wearing those colors together. But that's not a me problem. Like this is just, I have to get over it. And I have to say that in my birth, so Natalie's birth was my first birth. She it was very traumatic, and there was lots of things that happened with that. And but primarily the reason why it was so traumatic was because I had lost control over what happened to my body. And they just did things, and it wasn't actually emergent, and they didn't take the time to talk to me. They just did it. And I was left there not being able to move, and really like you could do anything to me at this point. And so that really left me traumatized. And the surgeon, he was not a great surgeon at all. Like he was just God's gift to humanity in his opinion. And yeah, and so I had to work through a lot after that birth. And so then my last birth, for all the reasons should have been super traumatizing. And yes, I had trauma with that. But as far as me going to a hospital and having the baby, my birth was then, it was so much more empowering because my choices were awful choices. Like what I had to choose from, it was not like, okay, you have a great option here and an awful option here. No, they were all crap. They were all horrifying. I was gonna die if I didn't do anything. And so, um, and the surgeon, he was another winner of bedside manners, man. He was awful.
Mm,
Bedside manners wise. Even him, like he sat there, laid out, okay, this is what has happened. These are your options. Really, you have like one viable option. But he said, you are welcome to leave this facility, go down to a different facility and get a second opinion. Do I think you have time for that? Like, do I think that you're going to survive that amount of time? I don't know that you will, but you have that choice. And that was so powerful, right? Like, okay, yeah, I could die between leaving this hospital and going to another hospital and getting a second opinion. And I truly felt at the time like I don't have that option. Like this is just stupid. It's just who I want to have the surgery done with. And but that alone, that okay, here's what's going on. Let's give you the full picture of what has happened and what we're gonna have to do to fix this so that you don't die. Um, what do you want to do? How do you want to proceed? Okay, let's do this. And I did. I said, okay, I consent to the surgery, and we consented to all of, the blood transfusion options and all the things. And even with that, like the blood transfusion options, they were like, listen, like you're very likely to die from bleeding. We really would like you to consent to a blood transfusion, but at the end of the day, it's still your choice. Like can refuse to have blood. And I'm like, I'm not gonna go through all this and not take blood.
Yeah.
But it was still the point of like this autonomous decision, right? Like, okay, we would really like you to survive this. We would really like you to make the decision that would make you survive and walk out of this facility, but it's your decision. And that was so powerful. So when I think about that experience, it's not so much the experience of actually being in the hospital and this trauma of being abused in the system. It was just the trauma of losing my child. Like all of that was the trauma. And I think that there's beauty in that of like you're not compounding trauma on trauma. You allowed
Yeah.
me to have autonomy. And even though this was a really crappy, horrific, like I have a case study on the whole at birth. They did a case study on it. It was a crappy situation. And um they still took the time to respect my autonomy. And for that, I'm really thankful. Like I told the OBs because it was the university hospital for UNLV. And I told the attending OBs, I said, first of all, do not turn into that surgeon over there. He is terrible. Do not be jaded like him. And they laughed. And I was like, I'm serious. Don't be jaded like him. But like they were so respectful. Even in one of the moments, um, because it's teaching hospital, they have lots of OBs. And I was the talk of the OB ward because of what was happening. And so like all these people were in my room and just like I was like, whoa, there are so many people in here. And one of the female OB interns, she was like, we're just gonna leave. It's fine. And so she took all of her peers and they just left the room. And I was like, thank you. Thank you for recognizing like, oh, this is too much for me. This is a situation that's already a lot and your presence is not welcome. And it's okay that we peace out for right now.
Mhm.
And it's just beautiful. Like that was really um it changed how I think about that experience. And I am thankful for how they treated me with that.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. There's pieces of that I didn't know. So, oh man. And that's something I would love eventually maybe to talk about just, you know, birth, because like you said, there's no guarantee of safety, no matter what our
Mhm.
choices are, where we are, what we're choosing, and just, people's attitude around death. Like they,
Mhm.
most people, it's not an option to say, hey, you could go down to the other hospital, but you might die. It's always like, you can't go anywhere because you could die. But at the
Right.
end of the day, we get to choose what's best for us. And if we want to
Mhm.
take the chance of going to another hospital, that should be ours as, a mentally well adult,
Yeah.
and so I love that. That is a prime example of, not feeling traumatized, even in a traumatizing situation or at least not compounding the trauma that you would experience by the people around, and that even somebody who has no bedside manner can respect autonomy, even if they're
Right.
not sweet about it there, but that option is still there. So I love that, and I'm glad that you had that in the midst of all that you were going through.
Yeah. And I am also. And I think that I don't know if you've been tested in that in other facets of your life of like really your core beliefs on autonomy. But my mom, she she died of chronic kidney disease. And she chose not to have hemodialysis. And that was not a popular choice, right? Like it was not. And so I've worked in the hospital setting prior to having children, and I have seen numerous renal patients, right? And so I'm like, yeah, I understand the reasons why you wouldn't want to go down that journey. Um, but at the same time, like she's not here because she chose not to do hemodialysis. And really the pushback for that, like even to the end of her life, like literally the days before she passed, like you know, there are people who had opinions and they were like, but if she just is, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, but that's not what she wants. I will support what she wants,
Yeah.
because she has made this decision. She has educated herself that was very much a person that she wanted to live during whatever years she had. So, like, she just didn't want to exist. She didn't want to have breath, but she wanted to fully live. And so, yeah, like to me, like her choice was fully in her um general life decisions of like, I want to live to the fullest of the time I have here. And, I'm not in need of extending my life just to be here, just to take up space. And I really respected that. Was that really hard at times? It was, because the reality is like, well, I would like you to be around and I want you to, you know, be able to have time with my kids longer and to have more conversations and all the things. But at the end of the day, like, you made this decision and you researched it and you came up with, you know, all the things that would be beneficial and hard. And death is just hard. Like, death is hard. And that is something like we could talk about too, is just like you said, like death is uncomfortable. And um walking with my mom through death, I felt like was this opposite version of a birth doula. Like, I felt like I just was walking this death doula, which we have, you've probably heard the term, and really just like holding space for her as she transitions to death. Um, and the hard thing for me was like not being able to like debrief with her afterward. Like, how was that? What should I have done
Right.
differently? Like it's just like it's done and that's it. And I don't have any feedback. And that was like, it's funny to say, but it's like, no, it really was hard to like be like, oh, what should I have done differently? But at one point she made the comment like, this is really hard. And and she's like, I'm just such a wimp. And I was like, Mom, no, you're like, this is death. Like, death is not for the faint of heart. Like, you, I was
Yeah.
like, you're doing a good job. And like, just being able to support her through that. And yeah, it was just an interesting experience as far as like the sacredness of it, because really it was like, man, you're holding this space for this person as they really are looking at the end. And it mirrored so much giving birth, right? Like, we sit there with a woman as she gives birth and she's like, it's so place like, I can't do this anymore. And you're like, yes, your baby's just around the bend. Just, we can see it because we're not in the middle of it, right? But in when you're in that space, you're like, I cannot do this anymore. I'm going to die. Like, when I gave birth to Corbin, I literally thought my pelvis was going to break in half. I mean, that kid, his little head was a little crooked, and so it just like was like, you're going to kill me. And so, it was beneficial to have support people telling me like, you're gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And that was the same for my mom though. Like, as she transitioned to death, it's like she's like, I can't do this anymore, but you're doing it. You're doing it. And whatever that looks like, you know, um, because death, it is like birth. Like, death has this like general thing of this is death, but each person has their own story. And it's very interesting for her, like her death was very much how she lived. Like, how she lived was how she died. And I think it's so beautiful. Like, she wanted to die in her bed with my dad next to her. And she did. And the very next day they were going to bring in a hospital bed for her to use, because so it could like the bed could raise and stuff, because she was having a hard time breathing. And but she did. She died in her bed
Oh,
with my dad next to her. And my dad was holding her when she took her last breath. So it was just like she she lived that way. She lived like very like this is what I want, this is what I'm gonna do, and she was very determined and um very mothering. She was mothering to the end of her, like literally her last night. She was like worried about me because I was not in the middle of the divorce at that point, but I had separated from my husband at that point, and so um she like was unaware of all the things that would come. But she at the time she was like, I worry about you with him, and I'm like, it's like seriously, you're like it's gonna be okay. But she was. And so, but it was beautiful. And I think that it gives me just more wisdom on the veil between life and death is so thin. And even my experience with loss is just you recognize the veil between life and death is so thin. And how we support those people through that transition is just as important. Um, even though we can't talk to them about it afterward. Like whatever experience they have, like it's valuable to them to their very last breath. And I think that that's beautiful and important. And really, like Kubler-Ross, she's known for the phases of grief, but actually, she was studying death and the dying person when she came up with those originally. And so it was the stages of grief in relation to dying. Um, originally. And so, yeah, like the dying person has to come to a place of acceptance, right? Like I am dying. And there's a lot to that. And there's a lot of like holding space for the people who are going to survive. And like I don't want to burden them with what it really is like for me. Um, And that's why I have a friend who has brain cancer, and I told her, like, I would love for you to have a person that you can just be totally transparent with because your experience is important too.
Yeah. Wow. So much. And again, another layer of why Jacque is so wise, not just educated in the formal sense, which I love and I'm so proud of you for, but also just in life experience. You are so multifaceted and wise. So I appreciate your contribution and presence in my life. And I'm just super happy that I get to share you with my audience of people in my life in hopes that people will find you and get what I know will be phenomenal care, love, guidance, direction, whatever it is that they're needing in the moment. So I would love for you to text me like your website and how to contact you so that anybody who sees this, hears this, can get in touch with you if you are just like resonating beautifully to them, which I know you will. And I cannot wait to see you continue blooming on your beautiful journey. I am so grateful for you, Jacque, and love you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to have a chat. And I love this kind of style of education and like giving education to others this way. And just thank you for your relationship that you give me and your friendship. And I truly value our life journey together. And so I will totally give you all the information. And yeah, just thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, have a great day, Jacque. Can't wait to talk to you again soon.
You too, Julie.
Bye.
Bye.